Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Chemical Kinetics Module 4, Lecture 2. This is Mallika Pathak from Miranda House, University of Delhi. The academic expert of the course is Dr. Amrita T. Sheikh, and the recording is being done under DTH Swayam Prabha project of the MHRD, New Delhi. So, till now we have studied about the reaction kinetics, the rate law, the rate of the reaction, order, molecularity. In the previous class, we talked about what are steady state approximations and how they can be used to deduce the rate law for the complex reactions in which there are multiple steps involved. Now today we are going to do continue with the same but a different part of the complex reactions, which are called as chain reactions. So these are again complex reactions, but these are reactions which self-propagate themselves. So they are called as chain reactions. So we're going to talk about the chain reactions, followed by a discussion on the chain length and the various kinds of chain reactions, stationary and non-stationary. We are also going to study the kinetics of these chain reactions using the steady state approximations, using some examples. So let's start with what are chain reactions. So chain reactions are nothing but a specific class of reactions in which highly reactive intermediates are produced in one step. And once they are produced, these reactive intermediates, which are short-lived and transient in nature, self-regulate and propagate the reaction, resulting in the reaction going on for a very, very long time and on its own. So these are called as chain reactions. They were first studied by Rice and Herzfeld in 1934, and that's why they are also called as Rice-Herzfeld mechanisms or reactions. So, important point, a reactive intermediate has to be produced, which is short-lived and transient in nature, which will carry out the reaction on its own for a very, very long amount of time. So, two important points, reactive intermediate to be produced, and that reactive intermediate should be able to produce or propagate the reaction for a very large amount of time and on its own. So, there are many reactions that proceed through the chain reaction, polymerization reaction. Most of the explosions are a part of the chain reactions. Then you have many reactions involving the gas phase pyrolysis, decomposition of acetaldehyde, polymerization reactions, reactions of hydrogen with halogens are also examples of the chain reaction. Now look at this diagram. This is from the standard book of physical chemistry called Atkins. So Atkins Physical Chemistry, it's one of the most standard books. So this is the diagram from the Atkins. So what you see is that this is an example of a chain reaction. As reactions once started, so there was bromine and it started and gave a free radical, and these free radicals then continued to take part in the reaction in multiple steps. We are going to discuss these steps and leading to the formation of product. So you have first the reactant forming an intermediate, resulting in the formation of product with large number of multiple steps. So this is the perfect example of how chain reactions proceed. And Rice and Herzfeld studied actually the reaction between hydrogen and bromine and came up with the concept of chain reactions and their mechanism. So let's study them. Now there are various steps which are involved in the chain reaction. So you have chain initiation step, you have chain propagation step, chain termination step, retardation step, as well as inhibition step. So let's start with discuss each of these steps one by one. So initiation, as the name suggests, it is about initiating the chain reaction. So how does an initiation of the chain reaction take place? When there is a formation of an intermediate which is very, very reactive in nature, so which are capable of propagating the reaction on its own for a very, very long amount of time. So in the chain initiation step, chain carriers, chain intermediates are produced, which are nothing but radicals, cations, anions, and these radicals and cations and anions will participate in the later steps of the reaction. How will they be produced? They are obviously produced by either collisions or photon absorption. So just see, this is a reactant R, in which either from energy or from collision or from photon absorption, a radical is produced. This radical obviously is very reactive in nature. We already know about the reactive nature of the radical, and this radical can then further react with the reactant molecules and produce more radicals, and which can take part in the reaction. So all this happens in the chain propagation. So first, chain initiation. In the chain initiation, the radical is produced. Once radical or the cation or anion is produced, it participates in large number of steps which are called as chain propagation step, where your reactive intermediate reacts with the reactant molecules, producing more and more reactive intermediate. So let's see, this is a radical. This radical has reacted with some more molecules which are reactant molecules and forming radicals continuously. These radicals can further react with other reactant molecules, producing more radicals. So these are called as propagation. They are self-propagating on their own. So once your reaction has been initiated, followed by when it is continuously taking place on its own and for a very long amount of time, everything which has a starting will also have a end. So once you have a beginning, you have to have an end, and the end is of a chain reaction is called as a chain termination step. So in a chain termination step, what happens is that the free radicals are removed from the reaction. So once the free radical is removed, obviously the chain growth will stop, the reaction will stop. So how does this happen? This step is in fact the reversal of the chain initiation step. So this can happen in any which way. Either the two radicals can combine to form a stable species, or it might just combine with either the product, but this termination step involves where the removal of the chain carrier has taken place. Now there are two more steps to the chain reaction. First, we talked about the chain initiation, propagation and termination. There are two more steps: retardation step and the inhibition step. Now, what is a retardation step? Obviously, we are talking about the retardation of a reaction. How will this take place? When you retard the rate of formation of product. How can you do that? When the product is being consumed. So, in the retardation step, the chain carriers attack the product molecules, breaking them into the reactant. This will result in the number of product molecules produced being reduced, resulting in the retardation of the or the reduction of the rate of product formation. So just see, the radical has reacted with the product, resulting in the formation of the reactant molecules, and therefore the rate of formation of the products has been reduced. Then there is another step called as inhibition step. Now this can happen like, I mean, these two steps look almost like the termination step, but they are not termination. Termination steps involves removal of the chain carriers leading to a stable product. In the retardation, the product reacted with the reactant, resulting in the net reduction of the product formation. In the inhibition step, what happens is that your chain carrier or the reactive intermediate reacts with either the wall or a foreign matter. Now, when it reacts with wall or a foreign matter, the number of chain carriers will reduce, and if the number of chain carriers reduce, the propagation steps will start to diminish. Once the propagation steps start to diminish, there will be a time when the termination itself will take place. So in the inhibition step, the chain carriers are being removed, but from the outside sources. So the outside source could be the reacting with the wall or with the foreign matter. Now, let's look at another term called chain length, which gives you an idea about how long will the chain reaction continue, and it gives you an idea of the number of propagation steps that are there in the reaction. So, it is defined as the number of product molecules formed per chain carrier which are produced in the initiation reaction. So, the number of propagation steps between the initiation reaction and the termination reaction are called as the chain length, and it is mathematically written as d product by dt upon d initiation step by dt. Continuing with chain length, let's look at the classification of them. So, chain reactions are classified as either stationary, non-branched, or non-stationary branch chain reactions, depending upon the number of radical molecules which are produced in the propagation step. So, if one radical is produced per radical consumed in the propagation step, then it is called as a stationary or non-branched chain reaction. But if more number of radicals are produced per chain carrier in the propagation step, then it is called as non-stationary or branched chain reactions. So, stationary or non-branched chain reactions are those where alpha will be equal to 1. So, one radical resulting in the formation of one radical in the propagation step. In the non-stationary or branch chain reaction, you will have one radical resulting in more than one molecules of radical being produced in the propagation step. Now let's study this mechanism, a general mechanism. So A, rate constant K1 forms radical. Radical combines with the reactant in the propagation step with rate constant K2, forming product and some more radicals. And these radicals can be terminated in the termination step through the rate constant K3. If we apply steady state approximation to this radical, we know that what is steady state approximation? Di by dt is equal to 0. Here Ri is R, so dr by dt is equal to 0. And how will we write? In the first step it is being produced, so K1 into A. In the second step, the net R molecules are alpha minus 1, so K2 alpha minus 1 R into A. And in the third step it is being consumed, so minus K3 R dot. If I make this equal to 0, I get the value of the concentration of radical, which is K1A upon K2 1 minus alpha A plus K3. Now, the destruction of the radical can occur in two ways, either by colliding with the walls of the container or by colliding with the other molecules. So this K3 can be replaced by Kw and Kg. So we will have R dot is equal to K1A upon K2 1 minus alpha A plus Kw plus Kg. This gives you an idea about stationary and non-stationary reactions. In the non-stationary reaction, this alpha is going to be greater than 1, and so this term will become negative. In the stationary chain reaction, this alpha is going to be equal to 1. So 1 minus alpha 0, so this term will become 0 and we will be left with K1A upon Kw plus Kg. Okay, so now let's look at the chain reaction. So we did discuss stationary chain reaction. So R dot has become K1A upon Kw plus Kg. So this shows that the concentration of the radical is equal to the rate of formation of radical in the chain initiation step and the rate of destruction of radical in the chain termination. Very logical. Your radical concentration will depend on the rate at which it is formed upon the rate at which it is being destroyed. So R dot is equal to K1A upon Kw plus Kg. So this stationary chain reactions result in non-branched chain reactions. Okay, so let's look at this example. The mechanism of hydrogen-bromine reaction was studied by Rice and Hersfield, and therefore it's in fact most widely studied reaction mechanism. So H2 gas combines with Br2 gas to give you 2HBr gas, and this mechanism was proposed by Rice and Hersfield. Br2 with the rate constant K1 gives 2Br. Br in the propagation step, Br radical combines with H2 with the rate constant K2 to form HBr NH radical. The H radical can react with the Br2 reactant with the rate constant K3 to form HBr and Br radical. In the retardation step, one of the hydrogen radicals combines with the product to form H2 and then Br radical. In the termination step, the radicals will combine amongst themselves and form product Br2. So if this is a mechanism given to you, we can find out the rate law based on the above mechanism. Yes, we are all very familiar with it. We have in the previous class studied steady state approximation and how to use it for the complex reaction mechanism. Writing the rate of formation of HBr from the above mechanism, very simple. K2 into Br into H2 because HBr is being produced. K3 into H into Br2 minus K4 into H into HBr because it is being consumed in the fourth step. But this involves now concentration of free radicals which have to be eliminated. And how do we go about doing it? We use steady state approximation. So we apply steady state approximation to both H and Br radicals. Now H is being produced in the first step, so K2 into Br into H2, consumed in the third step, minus K3 into H into Br2, consumed in the fourth step, minus K4 into H into HBr, and this is equal to 0. If I apply steady state approximation to Br, so dBr by dt is equal to 0, 2 Br radicals are being produced, so 2 K1 into Br2, minus K2 into Br into H2 consumed, produce, so K plus K3 into H into Br2, produce, plus K4 into H into HBr. What is noticeable here is the fifth step. In the fifth step, 2 Br is being consumed. So 2, then because the rate law is written as K5 into Br square, so minus 2 K5 Br square is what is written. Now these are nothing but mathematical equations, and so you can just use normal mathematical operations like linear equations, simultaneous equations to solve these equations. So what do? You use equation 2 in 3 and some of the terms will get eliminated out and you will be left with 2K1 Br2 minus 2K5 Br square, which will lead to the concentration of Br being evaluated. This Br can be then used in the equation 2 and we will get the concentration of H. So now we've got the values of the two concentration of H. We can directly substitute into the rate of formation of HBr, or we can simply simplify our first equation also. So if I use equation 2 in my rate of formation of HBr, it can be reduced to dHBr by dt is equal to 2K3H into Br2. I substitute the concentration of H radical, I will get this kind of equation. Now I will divide numerator and denominator by Br2 and I will get this kind of equation, 2K2 under root K1 upon K5 H2 into under root Br2 upon 1 plus K4 upon K3 HBr upon Br2. Now there is a lot of importance about this term. This term in the denominator HBr upon Br2 implies that the product presence decreases the rate of the reaction. So HBr concentration, which is the product, will in fact decrease the rate of the reaction. But this effect will be reduced if the concentration of the bromine is high, that is the reactant is high. So HBr presence will reduce the rate of the reaction, but this effect can be reduced if the concentration of bromine is itself very high. So all this term can be combined to give you K dash H2 into Br2 1 by 2 up on 1 plus K double dash HBr upon Br2, where K dash can be written as 2K2 upon 2K2 into under root K1 upon K5 and K double dash can be written as K4 upon K3. So depending upon how you want to express your equation, you can stop at any point. You could have stopped here also if you wanted to express the rate law, but because we wanted to show you the effect of HBr and Br2, therefore written like this. But depending upon how you are asked in your exams, you can do this. Now let's look at another example, dehydrogenation of ethane. So ethane can be dehydrogenated to give you ethene plus hydrogen. So the observed rate law here is dethene by dt is equal to K into ethane, which ethane is the reactant. Now a mechanism has been proposed for it, and from this mechanism we again want to derive the rate law. Very simple. First we write down the rate of formation of ethylene, which is the product. So d-ethylene by dt we see is equal to K into CH2 CH3 radical. Now if you have a radical in the rate law, you have to eliminate the radical. So you apply steady state approximations to all the three intermediates that are there. The intermediates are CH3, CH2, CH3 and H, and you apply steady state approximations to that. Di by dt is equal to 0 and you get the values. And once you get these values, once you get these equations, you can manipulate these equations using linear equations, simultaneous equations to get the concentration values of the intermediates, which can then be substituted. So here we have solved them and we get a quadratic equation like this. once you get the quadratic equation in ethyl radical, you can solve it and get the concentration of the ethyl radical. This can then be substituted into the rate law that you had got from the mechanism. D-ethylene by dt is equal to concentration of ethane and this whole term. So once you substitute this becomes equal to K into ethane. So very simple, you can just substitute it here. This is the required rate law. All these constants together can be combined to give you one rate constant, which is K is equal to K1 K5 plus root K1 square K5 square plus 4 K1 K3 K4 5 upon 2 K5. So this is the term. Again, I am reminding they are not very difficult. You just need a little practice with the working with equations, and if you have a look at it, you can solve it any which way that you like. This is the way that I have solved. You can solve it using any way, because I might be substituting one equation into other, but you can just simply use simultaneous equations. Okay. Now, one important point is that the chain initiation step has a low value because obviously only the radical is being produced. In the other steps, radicals are reacting, so their rate constant values are going to be high. So if I want, I can ignore the value of K1 square. So wherever K1 square is produced, I will reduce. So K1 square, K5 square can be neglected in comparison to 4K1, K3, K4, 5. And K1, K5 can be neglected in comparison to this. So if I make these manipulation, I will get that K is equal to K1, K3, K4 upon K5 under root 2. So this understanding is important. Now I can also get the value of chain length. Now we knew how we define the chain length? D product by dt upon D initiation step by dt. So you have the value of D product by dt and you have the value of D initiation step. So K1 initiation step, first step, the reactant was ethane and the rate constant was K1. So D product by dt and initiation step. So K1 into ethane, and you get this term. And this is very important because you see K1 has a very small value. Now if K1 has a very small value and it is in the denominator, that means this term has a very large value. So the chain length of a reaction in which this kind of thing is happening is going to be having a very large value. Similarly, we can study the thermal decomposition of acetaldehyde the way we have studied the other two examples. Exactly same. You first write down the rate law from the mechanism, then you apply steady state approximation to the intermediates. The intermediates I am reminding you that intermediates are those which are produced in the previous step and consumed in the later step. So you have CH3 here as the intermediate. Similarly, you have CH2CHO as the intermediate. So you have an idea what are the intermediates. So then you write down the rate of formation of methane, and you apply steady state approximation to the free radicals that are there or the reactive intermediates that are there. Then you simply manipulate those equations and get the values of your free radicals or the intermediates, substitute them into your rate law that you had devised, and this will finally, in the case of decomposition of acetaldehyde, lead to dCH4 by dt is equal to K CH3CHO 3 by 2, which is the required rate law. You can also find out the value of the chain length. So D product by dt upon D initiation step by dt. You have D product by dt value. You have the value of initiation step, which is K1 into acetaldehyde. You substitute, and this is the value of your chain length. So that is how you can study various reaction mechanisms. Non-stationary chain reactions. When alpha is greater than 1, more than one chain carriers are produced in the propagation sequence of the reaction. Such chains are called as branch chains or non-stationary chains, and the reactions are called as branched or non-stationary chain reactions. This theory was proposed independently by Soviet chemist N.N. Semenov and the British chemist C.N. Hinshelwood. Now, in a situation, let us assume when alpha is much greater than 1, that is, a very large number of chain carriers are being produced in the propagation sequence. That is, the concentration of the radical has become infinite, then what happens to this equation? If this happens, then in the denominator K2A alpha minus 1 becomes equal to Kw plus Kg. As a result, this denominator becomes 0 and the radical concentration becomes infinite. This leads to the rate of the reaction becoming also infinite and resulting in an explosion. So now this explosion depends on the temperature and the pressure of the reacting system. In fact, we observe 3 explosion limits as the pressure of the system increases during the course of the reaction. Let's look at this graph of pressure versus temperature for the hydrogen-oxygen mixture. You see that there are 3 explosion limits: first limit, second limit and third limit. Now let us understand the importance of these limits, but first understand the observation. There were two observations made, that the first explosion limit depends on the size of the vessel and the quality of the valve, but the second and third limits do not depend on these factors. So non-stationary chain reactions, why were they happening? Just to re-emphasize, they depended on the rapid increase in the concentration of chain carriers, leading to the increase of the reaction rate and finally to the explosion. Now, when the reaction rate increases, and if they are exothermic in nature, temperature will increase, rate will increase, more production. So this cycle will keep on going on, leading to a thermal explosion. And it has to be understood that the chain carriers are not needed for a thermal explosion. Let's look at this diagram of log P versus T. So what we observe is that at very low pressure, the pressure is outside the explosion region and the system reacts, the mixture reacts smoothly. At these pressures, the chain carriers which are produced in the branching steps can reach and collide with the walls of the container where they combine. No explosion. Now if I increase the pressure, the system passes through the first explosion limit and the mixture will then explode because the chain carriers have started reacting before they reach the walls and the branching reactions are explosively efficient. Again, once the first explosion limit is passed, again the system is moving at a slow speed till it reaches the second explosion limit. At the second explosion limit, the concentration of the molecules in the gas will be so great that the radicals produced in the branching reaction combine with the body of the reaction and the reaction will explode. Again, after the second explosion, again a steady reaction rate and the pressure has increased again. When the pressure has increased so much so that the third explosion limit is reached, the reaction rate increases exponentially and again a thermal explosion takes place. So this is how, depending on the number of carriers produced in the propagation steps, explosions are taking place. Why are they explosions? These explosions which are thermal explosions are not necessarily because of the presence of chain carriers, but because these chain carriers reacted through an exothermic reaction. These exothermic reactions lead to faster increase in rate, faster production of chain carriers, and so somewhat they depended on the chain carriers, but essentially the reactions were taking place because the reaction rate was very, very high. So till now we have studied chain reactions, chain lengths, stationary and non-stationary reactions, and these reactions with respect to the kinetics of the chain reactions with some examples. So for today we have done quite a bit of this. So thank you so much. Stay home, stay safe and take care of yourself.